Good morning, everyone. I'm Loren Israelsen, President of the United Natural Products Alliance, otherwise known as UNPA. I've been in this industry 45 years, and I have to say today, February 3rd, 2025, is one of the more interesting days in many a year. We are in the midst of tariff wars and all kinds of interesting things that I'll discuss with my guests today, Skye Chilton, CEO of Nammex, and Wilson Lau, CEO of Nuherbs. And a key discussion today is China and our relationship within the natural products industry with China. This is something that is, in my view, widely misunderstood, and it's critically important to understand several things. The scope of our relationship with China as a supplier of raw materials and finished goods into the natural product industry. How do you know you're buying good quality material? What are the mechanical steps of understanding that? Who's doing it well? We'll probably have a word or two about the current politics and the dynamics, both economic and political, with a few suggestions too for our viewers as to how they should be thinking about where we are today and how we continue to evolve with China. Let me start with a little personal background. I've been fascinated by China for many years. I have been to the country, 25, 30 times. I've actually been to more Chinese cities than United States cities, as it turns out. I've always found it a country that is fascinating. It is much more diverse than many people realize. You think of the east coast of China, the gigantic cities and the big, big buildings. But if you go into the interior, wow, it's absolutely beautiful. And you see both nature at its very best, as well as the scale and the scope of what is possible to do with natural products. My second observation is what a high level of respect and connection China has with natural products and nature itself. They have learned over thousands of years the fine art of cultivating and growing and wildcrafting. And that has been a central part of the growth of our industry. But we should also look at, again, how do we know? How do we know where these products are coming from? And the reason I'm very excited to talk to both Skye and Wilson is they're experts, boots on the ground. Both companies are between 35 and 45 years old. Wilson is its third generation, a company that started in Oakland, California with the Chinese herb shop in Oakland. I'm from Los Altos across the bay. And so we're Bay Area brothers in that sense. And Skye and his brother Adam have worked with Jeff Chilton, who is considered to be the modern pioneer of mushrooms and has spent decades and decades in China working with local growers, scientists, technical community, and are renowned worldwide for producing among the world's very finest mushrooms produced in China and made available here and elsewhere. Gentlemen, welcome. I'd just like to jump into a little bit and just give a sense to our viewers of how important China is to us. Let's take, for example, nutrients. A number of what I like to call apex nutrients. These are the most important ones that are the top of the chain to feed animals, for example. Without vitamin D3, chickens have a very hard time laying eggs. The shells break. China produces 100% of the global supply of D3. Folic acid, once again, 100%. Overall, 80% of what we buy in botanicals, enzymes, amino acids, nutrients, botanicals, it comes from China. Therefore, understanding who is doing what is critical. So maybe let me just start off. I'd love both of you to give us a real quick snapshot from your viewpoint on your company and your ethos and how you are continuing to advance quality at a time when market pressures, and now I'm speaking really of global economics, these tariff wars are going to be pretty tricky. Two things concern me: rising prices, drops in quality. How do we manage that? When anytime there's a price increase, you see an almost equal and opposite decrease in quality. And in the case of China, it'll be very difficult for us to see that happening because it's very difficult to understand. But you two know it as well as anyone. So, Wilson, let me start with you. I just love some opening thoughts.
Thank you, Loren, for having me on today. It is a tricky time given the current iteration of what's happening in the world, in the US and worldwide. I think our company was started by practitioners, and we started with a lineage in the Minha tradition, which is a low dosage, high result tradition. So quality is very important, because if you give low dosage of a low quality herb, you won't get any results. So quality is always our number one priority. And I think there are levers when it comes to price that get pulled on, per your comment, that quality is one of them. But I think, how can we navigate today's world without impacting quality and maybe even improving quality? I think, you know, with every hard time comes great ways to sort of overcome them. And one of them is, how do we look at things and not just look for the easiest solution? 10% drop in price, 10% drop in quality, right? Like, that's easy, right? But how do we re-examine the whole system so we can actually improve the quality and value we provide our customers? That's really important for us, and the ingredients that we provide out of China. And most of them can only be grown in China, because we specialize in traditional Chinese herbs that are used and grown in China. So there isn't too much choice when it comes to some of these herbs, most of these herbs.
Thank you, Wilson. Skye.
Yeah, thanks, Loren. Certainly we're in difficult situation right now. From the very beginning, when my dad started visiting China in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, he was faced with a quality proposition where, someone hands him a brown powder and tells him it's reishi, and he says, I have no idea what this is. And that sort of really set the direction at Nammex to figure out, what are the tests that we need to have in place to prove this to ourselves, and who are the proper growers and manufacturing partners that have proper quality standards and, the same ethos that we do of delivering high quality products. And then it's like, how do we prove that to ourselves, and how do we then prove it to our customers through added testing? But certainly mushrooms have a very heavy tradition in China, with the birthplace of mushroom cultivation over 800 years ago. China's producing over 90% of the world's mushrooms now. They've got dedicated research institutes for mushrooms. They have more mushroom scientists than any other country. They're eating more mushrooms per capita. So it's really ingrained into their society. It's a top 5 ag crop for them. So it's very big business for China. And in terms of quality, it's like the companies ultimately dictate that, who are importing it into the US. And that's really where the responsibility lies. So making sure that you're working with suppliers who have boots on the ground and really know their supply chain inside and out is very important right now.
Couldn't agree more. I started my career in this industry at Nature's Way, and at that time in the early 80s, most of what we bought was whole material, and we ground it ourselves. And the world has changed. We principally buy powders that come in big drums, barrels, bags. And in that transition from whole material to powder, you lose control to a large degree. You just don't know what it is. And this raises the specter of how important the analytical capabilities are that we now have to rely on, since we can't look at it and use our organoleptic skills. I'd love you to share some thoughts on what is the state of the analytical science as it relates both to mushrooms and to these very specialized Chinese herbs that one really has to understand the chemistry and the morphology and so on to understand these things. So I think a word about that is important for this reason. Both of you do it extremely well. There are many other companies that rely on a C of A as the only point of reference rather than having direct hands-on experience, many years of experience. And when you see something that looks wrong, you'll investigate and try and figure out why. If you don't know there's something wrong, just off it goes down the production line. So, Skye, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, certainly we trust our manufacturing partners for sure. We've had a 25-year relationship with them, but ultimately we're still verifying everything that they do. So we've recently brought HPTLC and HPLC in-house, as well as PCR. Just last year, we released our mushroom identification method using HPTLC to the industry. And we're now working with some of the big labs right now to make sure that they adopt that for their mushroom identification methods. So that's been a big win for us. We've also been working a lot with NMR, so nuclear magnetic resonance, to also look at these from a molecular level. And we can start to look at specific marker compounds for each one of these mushrooms. So ultimately, using a wide variety of the testing that's available to just keep building more and more checkboxes that we can, so it's not just one method that you're relying on. You've got multiple that are backing up and confirming your results there.
Great. Thank you. Wilson.
Yeah. I think for us, we're field to shelf specialists. So we really start with the whole material. And even before that, when it gets planted, what we're noticing is that as we increase the proficiency of our food safety programs and quality and how we might grow these things, these herbs, and process them in a more scientific manner, things change. And with weather change, climate change, things change, chemistry changes. So if we're using chemistry from 1980s or before, it can look slightly different or a lot different depending on the herb. And if we're, sun drying versus machine drying versus how we dry, the temperature range we hit, all these things impact chemistry, right? And if you're just using analytical methods willy-nilly, and I think that's what Skye is talking about, is not when you use analytical methods, you don't have to use an orthogonal method where you use A, B, C, and D to verify, right? Because A might look, you're like, what the heck is this thing? But then you go B, C, D. Okay, this is that mushroom or herb. Then you go back and say, what is causing this discrepancy in this A test, right? So you really can start drilling down into the quality issues of it, right? And I think that's where a lot of times where you're saying is when you just get a C of A with one test method, well, it could pass, it could not pass, it could be all sorts of things. But if you use an orthogonal method and have more insight into how the extract or herb is processed, you really will get some of these nuances that happen in natural products, for lack of better words. They're natural, right? There has to be variance.
Exactly.
They don't come out as synthesized.
Exactly. So in a sentence, you both companies have resident quality built into the systems, the process, the growing, and that very long experience that gives you insights that even the instruments themselves sometimes can't. But for those that don't have that level of expertise, very often there's a reliance on third-party certifiers or FDA perhaps. And this is becoming a really important question as it relates to China. Few statistics. Over the past few years, the number of inspections of facilities producing products that go to our industry by FDA in China have ranged between 5 and 2 over the last 5 years. It's not a criticism of FDA. I have been to the embassy in Beijing where the FDA is resident. These are pre-announced inspections. There's only one person who is doing inspections that covers our industry for the whole of China. An impossible task. This is true in other countries as well. So we really can't look to FDA to be that source of authority. Others look to third-party certifiers that are well-known in our industry. Here's my question. At the last trade show, Supply Side West in Las Vegas last fall, I had a friend collect as many brochures from the China supply exhibitors and did a survey looking at what GMP certifications they used and then compared it to what GMP certifiers are used in the United States. And guess what we found? That there is a significant difference between the two. And so with that misalignment, meaning that the methods of conducting these GMP audits and what is required is different. And part of it has been, in my judgment, a historic reluctance by the Chinese government to look to U.S. certifiers to say their materials are okay. Hence, they tend to use more European and Asian and Chinese certifiers. What's your advice to brand holders, contract manufacturers, but most importantly, the consumer, is how can you verify the quality of a product when you stand so far away from the supply chain and the manufacturing process? Other than me knowing you, I would buy your products in a heartbeat. How do we deal with this problem of establishing in a crowded marketplace true quality and why it's worth it to get the best that you can because our health is on the line?
What's the start, Wilson?
So, yeah, Wilson, give it a shot.
I'll start. I think I'll start with your first point, Loren, is that a lot of the certifications are European or Japanese, right? Really
Right.
the two. And that's really because the volume is there to justify it and they require it. Just like, if you're selling to Australia, you have to be Australian TGA certified. So you sell in the US, do you have to be NSF or SGS or whatever certification? You don't, right? So if I have to pay for a certification, I'm gonna pay for the one that is mandatory. So I think that's part of it, right? It's
Right.
like,
Right.
so I think that's where you really get that. Unless your core market is the US, you might get NSF or SGS or whatever certified. But other than that, you're going to go for the one that's mandatory. I think the second point really becomes is as we look into the supply chain, to your point, are you really buying, who are you buying from? Are you buying from a distributor, the importer? Who are you buying from in the supply chain, and how important is it to you? Because as an importer, I think Skye's in the same boat. They're the importer of record as well. We had to comply with the Food Safety Modernization Act, and we have a foreign supplier verification program, which I had to put every single ingredient that I import, no matter which manufacturer it comes from. Even if I have one manufacturer that supplies me 10 ingredients, I still have to verify each of those ingredients individually. It's not per facility. So it's really understanding, did the person you're buying from do the work, and what kind of work are they doing? What does their quality program look like? What resources do they have? Do they have feet on the ground? Per your comment, Loren, it's really expensive to get over there. And even if you get over there, you may not see what you want to see or need to see. It's really about understanding who you're buying from and what are you really buying, right? I say, one of the things that when I first entered the industry, I went to a regulatory conference and a lawyer from Heinz made a comment, well, tomatoes and the ingredients are probably only 50% of our costs. The other 50% is in the food safety programs and all the regulatory work we do. Well, if you think about that, right, we haven't really prioritized the value of food safety, ingredient quality into these systems and prices. So if it's $1 ingredient, we can't expect to pay $1.05, right? If we have these food safety programs in place that cost money and personnel and testing and really to do the work, there's also that costs involved that I think we often overlook, right? We just pencil it as some minimus cost, right, in the ingredients that we buy. So that's how I would sort of look at it. Know who you do business with, make sure that they are doing the right work, and really verifying that the process and they're following the right rules.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great points, Wilson. I would think, we've got a general market trend towards transparency in labeling and transparency in sourcing. And I think for brands like Wilson and I, it's just like part of that is telling our story too, and really showing where these ingredients come from and how they're processed, and outlining all these quality control procedures that we have in place to guarantee the safety and quality of these ingredients. Because ultimately, yeah, we're the importer of record. So it's like, it's really on us to guarantee the quality. And you can kind of say whatever you want about China, but it's like, we're guaranteeing this. Here is all the different tests that we're putting in place. Here's, where we're sourcing it from. We're doing independent GMP audits of our facilities to make sure that they're following proper GMPs. And then we're adding all these extra tests on top of that and complying with all the US regulations that are in place for food safety. So ultimately, I think it comes back to, are you buying from good suppliers? Can they tell you exactly what are the checkboxes in place that they have so that you can trust that you're getting good ingredients? Because certainly, like you said, Loren, there's ingredient brokers that sell everything. Is that the best thing? I think now it's like we're really getting into specialization where you kind of know, say, farm to table. It's like we can trace these things back to exactly the farm that they came from and tell you how they've been processed along the way and give you all the marker compounds and specific identifications that we have to guarantee you exactly what this is. And so knowing that we have that in place, I think there's an obligation on us to really share that out there so people and companies can see, what good companies are doing.
Well, I'd like to end on an optimistic note, to take a part of your playbook, Wilson, when you said that in unsettling times, as we see right now, where tariffs is the subject at the moment, And there will be very robust discussions between the U.S. and China that this administration has commissioned a complete review of the U.S.-China trade relationship and all that goes into it. That report is due on April 1st, 2025. That is probably one of our best opportunities to make our case to the Department of Commerce. Happily, UNPA has a very good and active relationship with Commerce, and we have raised these issues in the past, but didn't really have a vehicle to get to this kind of discussion. It's not just about the pricing equities and getting that right, but it's also establishing the quality parameters so that what we're buying is really what we want for U.S. consumers. So there's a great opportunity, and let us use it. Very often, this comes around once in a generation, which I think is the case here. And so for those that have a keen interest in both as a consumer and using products that come from China, and that is all of us, that is every single supplement and natural product consumer, is now to turn our attention in a very focused way to see if we can't help improve this on the big scale, as well as to continue our efforts every day to day. But boy, is it tough and you're trying to tell your quality story in a very crowded marketplace with many voices. I think it's really important for organizations like UNPA to step up and to raise our hand in support of companies that we absolutely believe in and trust in their quality, who are members of the community, that invest in the community. This is essential for us for a strong future. With that, I want to thank both of you so much for joining me today. And I'd like to invite you both back. I think we have a lot more to talk about as things are evolving over the coming months, and hopefully report out good news. We'll probably have some distressing news as well, but we'll take it all as it comes, and we'll do our best. And I do look forward to seeing you at Expo West coming up here very shortly.
Definitely.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.